May 17, 1967, 14:35 hours. Major General Edward Lansdale, Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities, stood before a classified briefing room filled with senior officials and delivered a line that would echo through intelligence circles for decades. Gentlemen, we have a problem. Our Australian allies achieved in 6 weeks what our Special Operations Forces failed to do in 6 months, and they did it with 12 men. Number American support and methods we told them would not work. Silence filled the room. Generals rarely admit failure, and Lansdale had just revealed that 120 soldiers from the Australian SAS in Fuak, 2 province, were producing better intelligence and operational results than tons. 5,000 American personnel. The figures on the screen were uncomfortable. Australian patrols averaged missions of 18.7 days, while American patrols averaged just over 4 days. Australian teams generated about 23 actionable intelligence reports per mission, while Americans produced about 6, most needing further confirmation. Casualties told the same story. Australians suffered 3 wounded and 0 killed per 100 missions. Americans 47 wounded and 12 killed. The implications were severe. Either American training was lacking, doctrine was flawed, or soldiers were less effective than their allies. None of those conclusions were acceptable. Then Lansdale displayed a photograph taken by an Australian patrol showing a North Vietnamese regimental headquarters. American intelligence had searched for since January. The Australians had located, photographed, mapped, identified commanders, and documented defenses with only 6 men in terrain. American forces had swept 3 times without results. Colonel Richard Hayes from Special Forces Command stood angrily asking if the implication was that Australian troops were superior to American Green Berets, and suggesting luck or prior American operations explained the discovery. Lansdale calmly replied that the Australians spent 3 weeks studying enemy patterns before moving into position, tracking supply routes, identifying trails, and following them to their source. They operated in an area Americans had declared clear because previous sweeps found nothing. They succeeded not by hunting the enemy, but by reading the environment and letting it reveal the enemy location. Over the next 4 hours, the discussion would reshape how America viewed reconnaissance, special operations, and the meaning of elite soldiers. The story explains how Australian success embarrassed American leadership into a major doctrinal overhaul. The reaction was not anger at Australia, but frustration at failing to see what the Australians understood. Embarrassment became the spark for transformation, and a handful of operators altered the direction of American special warfare. The crisis began 3 months earlier with a joint intelligence review showing Australian teams independently operating or identifying units, tracking movements, and collecting strategic intelligence at rates that made American efforts look ineffective. Initial reactions dismissed the data as anomalies due to small sample sizes, luck, or easier terrain. But as evidence grew, those explanations collapsed. The Australians were consistently outperforming American reconnaissance in similar conditions. The turning point came during Operation Junction City in April 1967, one of the largest operations of the war, involving 22000 troops, helicopter assaults, artillery, and B-52 strikes. Thousands of enemy were killed or captured, and large quantities of equipment seized. So, by conventional measures, it was a success, yet intelligence analysis revealed American forces never located the main target, the mobile headquarters known as COSVN, nor major supply caches, nor key infiltration routes. Despite 72 days of operations, 3 weeks later, a 6-man Australian patrol operating 40 kilometers away reported discovering a major supply route, a logistics hub, enemy strength, and a headquarters complex with precise coordinates and detailed observations. The report was filed and awaited verification as usual. Signals intelligence confirmed it. 2 weeks later, agent reports. 3 weeks after that, by the time action was taken, the enemy had moved and the opportunity was gone. When analysts compared Australian patrol reports with American reports from the same period, the disparity was embarrassing. Australians repeatedly found positions, routes, and patterns. Americans had missed. Colonel David Morrison, tasked with explaining the gap, concluded, American reconnaissance focused on denying terrain and destroying enemies, while Australian reconnaissance focused on gathering intelligence and understanding the enemy. Americans engaged on contact. Australians observed and reported. American success was measured in casualties inflicted. Australian success in intelligence gained. Case studies illustrated the difference. During 1 week, an American team engaged enemy forces in a 4-hour firefight, called in heavy support, and withdrew with 2 wounded and 6 enemy dead, considered a success. Meanwhile, an adjacent Australian patrol spent 7 days observing without engagement, documenting dozens of enemy movements, supply caches, trail networks, and a battalion headquarters without casualties, producing intelligence that enabled later operations to destroy infrastructure. Morrison asked which outcome had greater strategic value: 6 enemy casualties or intelligence that crippled an entire battalion. Americans traditionally valued body counts, while Australian results suggested understanding the enemy was more valuable than killing them. The briefing in May aimed to force leaders to confront this reality, but many officers resisted. Brigadier General Thomas Crawford argued Australians operated in easier conditions. Lansdale presented data showing Australian teams worked in dangerous areas for weeks with fewer casualties than American teams in supposedly secure zones. Crawford then suggested inflated reporting, but verification showed Australian reports were accurate and often conservative. The debate intensified until Colonel James Parker, a decorated officer with multiple tours, said the issue was not who were better soldiers, but whether the right tactics were being used. Australians were fighting an intelligence war, while Americans fought a war of destruction. Both had value, but intelligence was what was most needed at that moment. Change followed slowly. In June 1967, military assistance Command Vietnam authorized a formal study of Australian methods, sending selected American officers to train with SAS units in a program unofficially nicknamed Operation Humble Pie. Participants faced pressure, admit Australian superiority and risk careers, or defend American doctrine and fail. Most chose honesty. Captain Michael Chun reported fundamental philosophical differences. American doctrine emphasized find, fix, destroy. Australian doctrine observe, understand, report. He described patrols moving only meters after hours of observation, detecting signs of enemy presence Americans would miss. He witnessed an ambush prepared for 11 hours, executed in seconds with minimal exposure and maximum effect. An Australian warrant officer explained they avoided calling in heavy fire because it would reveal positions and destroy valuable observation opportunities. Intelligence on enemy patterns was more valuable than temporary body counts. All 12 American reports reached similar conclusions. Australians were not lucky. They operated under different assumptions, priorities, and measures of success. Some Pentagon officials wanted the program ended, claiming it harmed morale. Others argued the officers had become biased. Yet a growing group supported adopting the methods. In August 1967, the debate effectively ended with the Battle of Suoi Sho Fa, where Australian tactics proved devastatingly effective. Intelligence indicated a strong enemy presence in the village. Complex, but Australian reconnaissance revealed a far larger force with extensive defenses. An assault based on original estimates would have caused heavy losses. Australian commander Lieutenant Colonel Philip Bennett delayed the operation, requested reinforcements, and redesigned the plan using precise intelligence. Artillery targeted known positions, infantry blocked escape routes, and the attack began only after defenses were weakened. The battle lasted 18 hours, resulting in heavy enemy losses, minimal friendly casualties, and large equipment captures. William Westmoreland, visited to congratulate Bennett and asked about his philosophy. Bennett explained Australia could not afford heavy casualties with only about 8,000 troops deployed, while the United States had committed hundreds of thousands. Therefore, Australians invested time in reconnaissance to fight smart, rather than simply fight hard, killing soldiers. Was tactical, destroying their ability to operate, was strategic. Intelligence-driven operations aimed for strategic effects, while American firepower emphasized tactical results. Following this demonstration, American special operations gradually incorporated Australian techniques emphasizing extended patrols, passive observation, and intelligence collection. Resistance persisted, especially among conventional forces, focused on measurable destruction, but improvements appeared. Casualty rates declined and intelligence quality increased. By 1968, American reconnaissance approached Australian effectiveness, though not equal in consistency. At the special operations level, the change became permanent, the emphasis on intelligence, patience, and deep understanding of enemy systems traces directly to lessons learned from Australian performance during the war. Programs established later integrated these ideas. Founders of Delta Force trained with Australian SAS. The 75th Ranger Regiment adopted similar reconnaissance methods, and U.S. Navy SEALs incorporated extended patrol techniques. Modern American special operations now blend aggressive direct action with intelligence-focused reconnaissance, rooted in those experiences in Vietnam. Deeper lesson concerns institutional humility. Initial reactions were denial and defensiveness, while productive reactions required curiosity and adaptation. American culture often assumes size, resources, and technology guarantee superiority. Vietnam showed otherwise. Australians succeeded not because of better equipment, but because their methods suited guerrilla warfare and reconnaissance requirements. Some officers who advocated change advanced reform. Others saw careers stalled for challenging established doctrine. Captain Robert Sullivan, whose critical report praised Australian effectiveness, was passed over for promotion and eventually resigned, stating he joined to serve his country, not protect egos, and that valuing pride over results was the real problem. History later validated his analysis, as the methods he supported became standard. Australians themselves never intended to embarrass anyone. They followed doctrines suited to their circumstances. Diplomats like Major Peter Collins carefully explained success without criticizing American approaches, privately noting Americans took the comparison personally rather than as a chance to learn. The need to preserve alliance relations slowed honest knowledge transfer. These lessons influenced every subsequent conflict. When American special operations were rebuilt in the 1970s and 1980s, Australian ideas were woven into training and doctrine. The embarrassment of 1967 became a foundation for future excellence. The ultimate lesson is simple: proud militaries must remain willing to learn from allies, regardless of size or status. Sometimes, the most valuable improvement comes when another force demonstrates a better way. The embarrassment may hurt, but the insight saves lives, and the transformation that follows creates capabilities that would not exist without the humility to learn from those who truly understand the fight.